Hello, good morning. John Hurst here, singer, actor, writer, and political activist and occasional commentator. Last night, I had the wonderful opportunity to see Shotgun's production of a play that was done using Zoom entitled Observing the Niceties. It was a wonderful, compelling piece that examined the issues of white privilege in the form of a drama that develops as a result of a student's meeting with her advisor regarding her thesis. The advisor and teacher is represented by a character who is a Caucasian, established, tenured, or soon or hopes to be tenured professor, who during the course of their meeting demonstrates a degree of ignorance and lack of awareness about the impact of white privilege, and makes some remarks that are clumsy, ill-considered, and insensitive. As a result, the student reacts by recording the conversation without her knowledge and threatens to release the recording to the general public, which she does. The result is a great deal of controversy, and the drama is really then focused on their dialogue and conversation regarding the students' demand that the teacher take much more affirmative steps to recognize the impact of racism, and indeed to give up some of the things that she has taken for granted. My comments are not so much about the piece per se. The acting is wonderful, the writing compelling, the characters believable and strong. But it's really more about the issues that it brought to the fore, because for me, it struck me that the piece really brought into focus the central challenge that I think many people are grappling with, which is the transfer or the restructuring of power in this country. And many people who are demanding changes in confronting the effects of systemic racism have quite rightly, and I think accurately, pointed out that things will not get better until there is a profound change in how power is structured, experienced, and shared. And so the question that the drama really brings to the fore is, how do we achieve social justice through the restructuring and the redistribution of power in a way that results in true progress? That, for me, was the fundamental question that the play, which was brilliantly acted and wonderfully directed, really posed. And it's why I think the need for a national reparations bill is so vital. Because when I thought about the play and let it sit with me, it struck me that the resistance or reservations or outrage of the teacher in being told that she should give up her job because of the controversy reflected the feeling not of just that hypothetical character, but the feeling of many people who are resistant to the idea of change. And I think that resistance is based on the projected fear that they are going to be punished or asked to sacrifice or give up things in ways that are not in proportion to their actual transgressions or sins or lack of awareness in terms of white privilege. Now, I realize I'm a Caucasian, and I'm saying all these things, and I've not experienced racism myself. I have not had the horrible experience of having to wake up every day and worry about whether or not I was going to be pulled over because I was African American, or stopped by cops simply because I was African American, or viewed with hostility by law enforcement simply because I'm African American. I acknowledge all of that. I do, however, think that a national reparations bill is vital for helping people to distinguish between a national act of justice and reparation and restoration, and the projected and inaccurate perception that if they support radical change, if they support social and economic justice, that they are not going to be punished for things that they themselves are not responsible for. When I say not responsible for, I am of course referring to the actions of our founding fathers, to the continued perpetuation of racist and systemic systems that are openly or covertly hostile to not just African Americans, but also lots of other minorities too, and also, of course, blue-collar workers in some ways. But obviously, in the case of bigotry and racism, these things are directed and structured in a much more hostile way towards African Americans in this country than they are towards Caucasians, who, as I said, like myself, do not have to worry about whether or not, for the most part, unless I've broken some law or I'm acting in some bizarre fashion, who for the most part do not have to worry about being stopped by cops as I walk down the street, or for the most part do not have to worry about being attacked by right-wing neo-Nazi vigilantes if I happen to be in the wrong neighborhood or a different neighborhood. So all these things are true. Why do we need a national reparations bill? Well, one, because it's a national collective. It would represent an act of atonement, and more importantly, it would represent a recognition that justice cannot be hypothetical if it is to mean anything, or if it is to be seen as having integrity or credibility with people across the nation. We need a national reparations bill so that we can directly confront the vestiges and remaining impact of bigotry and systemic racism in this country. I also think we need it because one of the points that the fictional teacher, the character of the fictional teacher made, and again, she made it while really not being cognizant of many things that she needed to, but she made one observation, which is if you simply reject everyone who don't agree with you, or if you simply ignore the fears of everyone who has not experienced the same traumas or experiences that an individual has or a group of people have, then it's going to be hard to develop allies and supportive groups who are so vital in the work of creating a truly just and fair society. So, a national reparations bill, which is something that would have to be thought out, but which is certainly within our means to achieve and pass if there's sufficient will in Congress and we have a president who is not an outright neo-fascist and bigot, is certainly something that this country could and should do. Because, as I said, it would allow people who have not experienced racism to understand that they are not being asked to pay a price that is, random, or that represents an act of revenge, or that is subjective, or is personal, or personally targeted at them as a way of getting even for the sins and the transgressions of people, not just in the past, but currently. It would allow the nation to see that we are addressing this systemically, that we are doing it fairly and objectively, that the transition or the sharing of power was something that we can achieve, and that we can achieve it through a mechanism that does not vilify any group for the sins of those in the past, or even for the sins of specific individuals who should be addressed specifically for their actions. So, those are my thoughts. It was a wonderful play, and I applaud the Shotgun Players for just a brilliant production, wonderfully acted, tight, riveting dialogue. As a writer, I probably would have condensed a few things, but it was a wonderful piece. And this commentary is really not so much about that in terms of the the writing, all of which was just very, very good. The acting was wonderful, and of course, as I said, the direction was just superb. This commentary today was more about, as I said, my reactions to the piece and why I think it is so vital that a national reparations bill must be passed as a vehicle for this nation to finally address the systemic impact of racism in a way that makes it clear that we are addressing an injustice that was experienced by a specific group of people in a very heinous way, and that we are doing so to address that injustice, that we are not, as a nation, seeking vengeance, and that what we are demanding is the creation of a just republic, something that we have failed to do, and a promise that I certainly think, as a patriotic American, we have failed to keep to far too many African Americans, of course also to Latinos, to women, to transgender people. But since the subject of the play was racism, my comments today were about, and were focused on the need, as I said, to pass a national reparations bill. It is time, and I think that the play last night spoke to the fact that until we create a vehicle that can allow people to separate their projected fears from the reality of achieving transformative change in a way that is fair, consistent, and measurable, and not personal, or doesn't make it overtly seem personal. It's always going to be experienced as personal, because these are profoundly personal experiences. But until we pass a bill that can provide a vehicle for both sides to engage in and have dialogue around, and then produce a substantive piece of legislation that allows us to at least systemically address these issues, we will continue to be a divided nation. All right, so my thanks to Shotgun for inspiring these thoughts, and also for inspiring really a wonderfully dynamic dialogue and conversation that, as so many people have said, needs to be continued, as uncomfortable as it may be. Love and blessings to everybody from John Hurst, singer, actor, writer, political commentator, and patriotic American at large. Take care.